Okay. So we can do these little prayers again, if you would like. Sow a few seeds in the mind, because prayers are just thoughts. Another way of practicing, that's all. The yellow one, refuge. It's just practice, it's just thoughts. So the first thought we're putting in, reminding ourselves of our reliance upon the Buddha, his Dharma, and the Sangha. And the second two lines expressing the altruistic motivation for doing it, which is bodhicitta. Why am I doing this? So I can become a surgeon to help all the suffering people with cataracts. Why am I doing this? So I can become a Buddha. That's why I'm sitting here. That's why I'm having my breakfast, why I'm breathing, why I'm sleeping. So, then the next prayer, these 7 limbs is stating these 7 practices. The thought of making frustrating, it's like paying respect, making offerings, so auspicious, acknowledging negativity, acknowledging virtue, requesting the holy beings to stay, requesting the holy beings to teach, dedicating. There's like a summary of many of the practices. This is where he quotes, create merit, unquote. And we'll discuss this, try to get it clear. It can sound again very religious and we get confused about the word, how come it's practice, We'll talk about that. And then the third prayer is making this offering, the mandala. And that means, in the simple sense, the contents of the universe. So if you know the contents of the universe according to Buddha's cosmology, that's fine, offer all that. If not, just offer the contents of the universe as we can see it, according to our karmic appearances. All the beautiful things that beings use that make them happy. Just pile them all up. Offer. And we think of offering it to the Buddha as if he were here himself giving the teaching, as a request for the teaching. Sangye chadang soke chongnam la jamcho baru dagni kyak suchi dagi chönye gipe sonan ki drola penche sangye dropa shok. So okay, normally before teachings, if you look at the third line it says jinsog. Maybe the second line, is it there? Jinsog? Anything? Yeah. Well, that means by the merit of practicing generosity and the other perfections, which is the 6 perfections, which we'll talk about. Not generally speaking, but when you do it before teachings, you're saying by the merit of listening to the teachings. So that instead of jinsog, you'd say shi nien, listening to the teachings. So we can do that one. Sangye charam soke chognam la jangsho baru dagni kyak suchi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye dropa shok. Sangye chadang soke chognam la jangsho baru dagni kyak suchi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye dropa shok. And now the 7 limbs. Kosongu pego ne chakselo nasham yitrul church in Malubul togmene sakdik tung tam cheshak ke page wanam la jeiram korwa matong mardulek juknek drola cheki kolo korwadan dagjen genam jang chup chen pornu. You could do the mudra if you like. They're very skillful, using the body as well as the speech as well as the mind. Because we create negativity with our bodies, but why not create some virtue? It's like mudras are like kind of gang signs, all these mudras, gestures. Very wonderful idea. So this one is imagining according to Buddhist cosmology, the universe. In the center here, there's 2 fingers poking up, that's Mount Meru, and then these 4 corners, that's the 4 continents. So maybe we can show each other later. Saji ki jukshing metok tramri rabling ji ni de gen paji sangye jing du mi te Edam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niyatayami. So we'll continue with the transforming problems idea, that the things expressed in the 8 verses, which is part of the Bodhisattva path where we were at in the past. But before that, let's look at this idea of where all these types of things fit into the practice. It's easy to be confused if you look at the whole Tibetan Buddhist package. Exactly what's in practice mean? It gets very confusing because it's so ancient. The tradition, it's all set there. But we have to unpack it to really understand where all the things fit. So as I mentioned, we look at the Lamrim, we get to high school where we get to the root to see the causes of suffering, the delusions, and to see this particular just how monstrous they are and how they cause so much pain and how they are the root of why I cause suffering and why I suffer. To get to really see that and then to change the mind eventually, to uproot all the delusions, that is where you actually be a Buddhist. That's where you're in sync with Buddha's view. That's where you actually... Because, abiding by the laws of karma, generally, practicing morality, that's common to any decent person. A good communist would abide by the laws of karma, not thinking of it this way, of course, but they'd attempt not to harm, not to lie, not to steal. Generally. Morality is what all good people share. So that's not unique to the Buddha. But this one, his view of the mind, there are elements of it you can say are similar to the Hindus. But this is where you become a Buddhist. So that's actually Buddhist practice. That's Buddhist practice. But the point is this. Because for so long have we been not practicing, have we been practicing the opposite, the delusions, the neuroses, believing in our karmic appearance, the self-existence, and this and that, and you, bad, good, this, blah, blah. All the lies that our delusions are that mislead us. We've been practicing those for so long that what looks easy to, quote, change the mind, unquote, is insanely difficult. So it's not enough just to go and change your mind. You can't do it on its own. And this is for me a good analogy. It's a dumb one, but it works for my mind. And I always use this example, and as I especially use that in America. I use it in the States, Basketball. I think of Michael Jordan. Of course, he's probably a grandfather by now, doesn't play basketball. And I don't know what, I can't think. I could say Brett Kirk or something, You don't know who he is, do you? He's an ex-Swan, now as assistant coach for Fremantle. So anyway, a famous Australian footballer, I don't know, maybe Michael Jordan's more famous than any Australian footballer in Australia, I don't know. But let's just use Michael Jordan. We know he's a basketball player. Okay, so you go to basketball and you see that the bottom line is getting the ball in the hoop, isn't it? This is the point. This is the point. And you're really excited. Oh, I'd love to do that. And it looks real easy. You just go, boom, gets in the hoop. Oh, please, Michael, please show me how to get the ball in the hoop. And what will he tell you? He will say, I want you to go for 10 years, lose 20 kilos, do this, do that, become fit. You'll probably lose 20 years as well. Go learn how to jog, go to university, go to college, learn all the mechanics and the theories of basketball, the skills, learn to work with a team. You say, no, Michael, you didn't hear me. How did I get the ball in the hoop? And he'll repeat his answer, won't he? Because it looks easy. It looks so simple when it comes down to it. But to be qualified to do that every time, you need to do masses of other work. You've got to prime your body and mind, don't you? Deeply. We get that. That's where all this other stuff comes in. You can't just go work on your mind. It is the point. But we can see because of the entrenched neuroses, it's impossible. We're not primed. We're not capable of just changing the mind. So this is where, and we have to think about it, all these other practices that relate to the Buddhas, which is so totally integrated into the Tibetan path. This is where they come in. You've got to think about this because it's not evident to us. If you sit there, take refuge and make offerings to the Buddha and do devotional things, this is what they call creating merit. This is the push-ups. This is all the preliminary work that primes your mind to be able to change it. You have to think about this. That's really where it all fits. That's where so you've got two kinds of, you've got practices where you actually practice, which is when that moment you have the dishes and you're mad at product because he's not coming and doing the dishes with you. And that moment you see your mind clearly, you see the anger, you have a few minutes of argument with it. The good roommate comes out and argues with anger and its pathetic self-centeredness. Within 3 minutes you've changed your mind. That is Dharma practice. And that, finally, is the practice that gets you to become enlightened, doing this deconstructing. Stopping believing in the lies the mind tells. But we can see how monstrously difficult that is. You say to a person full of rage and paranoia, I'll change your mind. It's like a cosmic joke. It's like a cruel joke. You tell a person who's overwhelmed by victim mentality, hate and fear and guilt and rage and confusion, tell me you can change your mind. It's like insulting. Impossible. Tell a person you can't even walk. Well, you can get the ball in the hoop. It looks easy. It is. But you've got to do an awful lot of work to prepare you to be able to do it. This is the point of all these practices. And that's why, for example, you could happily, necessarily need to, watch your breath. It's a great technique to help you get focus. But you could sit there for 1,000 years watching your breath, get very, very wonderful single-pointed concentration even. But they say the merit is not so strong. The virtue. So, okay, what's merit mean? It's this nice, holy Tibetan word, Indian word probably. Create merit. Purify the mind. One way of describing all of practices is into two things. Creating merit, purifying. And you could sort of say that most practices have both elements, but some are specific, for purifying, and some are specific for creating merit, traditionally in one's practice. And so creating merit, just bare bones meaning, is thinking of virtue and doing a virtue. That's all. Sowing a good seed. Purifying is pulling out a bad seed or weakening a bad seed. It's a simple way to say it, which is the logic of karma. Because with these terms, we're not used because they've been passed down for centuries, and then we see them as self-existent and we don't understand them, like everything is empty. These terms, we've got to unpack them and see the logical meaning of them. Because the point is this. If there's a single syllable in Buddha's instructions, a single phrase that can't be put into practice, that doesn't lead to practice, that doesn't lead you to change your mind, then it's merely a ritual and it's just superstition, and throw it out. I can't stress this enough. We're so used to thinking that religion and spiritual is just faith and ritual and beyond meaning and mystical and can't be understood. We're deeply ingrained with that thought. Total nonsense. So, as Lama Tsongkhapa says in one of his wonderful labyrinth texts, a sweet one called Songs of Experience, all the advice is to be taken, all the teachings are to be taken as sound advice. So you open a book of cake recipes. All the words here in this book are to be taken as advice. And what advice? Help you learn to cook. It just goes without saying. If you just have a book full of raving on about the beauty of cakes, you'd be very disappointed and you wouldn't want to buy the book. You need to know how to do it. And that's the point. We get this so clearly. And look at the clarity of instructions in cookbooks. Look at the research we do to get the recipes right. You wouldn't put a single recipe in if it was slightly not sure if it was working. Look at the rigour and the discipline and the clarity and the checking we do before we publish that book. But look at the disgusting way we treat spiritual. Any person has some kind of religious experience, they write a bloody book about it. And they're, oh wow, far out of spiritual. I mean, it's so rude, it's so wrong, it's so misleading. Most of the stuff that's published is just people, you read all the Buddhist books of Westerners, with respect please, my opinion. Learn a bit about Buddhism and you write your own bloody-da, mixing it with this and all this speculation. It's just so depressing. There's no rigour, there's no discipline, there's no clarity, there's no checking. It's just blah, blah, blah. We just think it's blah, blah, blah. Every single word has to be instruction, has to be put into practice. If it can't be, if it can't be, then it's just rabbiting on. So, as he says, all the teachings are to be taken as sound advice, because there is no contradiction between scripture and practice. Meaning every single word in the teaching, every syllable has to lead to being put into practice, which is to help you become enlightened. And if it isn't, if there's a single ritual or a single practice that's merely ritual, as what we think, if it's merely ritual, because someone said you should do it, it's simply superstition. Chuck it out. And I'm serious. We have to remember this. Because when you come in to walk into Tibetan Buddhism, you can't believe the rituals. The way, hold this, do that, sit this, prostrate this way, put your feet this way, don't put your hands this way. It's the instructions are phenomenal. And of course we think it's a ritual. How does it possibly seem to us when you make water bowl offerings that that's psychology? Excuse me. seeing the Buddha this way with a green light body, blah, blah, saying a Sanskrit sound, prostrating your body on the ground. Of course we think it's ritual. And we assume ritual is meaningless. It's just a habit that someone taught you you're somehow supposed to do. It's just superstition. You've got to go beyond the packaging to see the meaning, the purpose. And if there isn't one, if it's just somebody said it and you're just superstitious, then please tear it up, put it in the bin and stop doing it. Every single breath, every instruction, every meditation, every bit of philosophy, every bit of whatever, every ritual, everything you do with your body, speech and mind, if it's called Buddhist, if it's valid, it has to lead you one further step to the purification of your mind and the realization of all of things. You've got to realize that so clearly. Then it makes sense. Of course, initially it mightn't make sense, but if you take that as your hypothesis, then you can relate. You can go slowly, slowly and start to unpack it and understand it. So, all, they say, the Lamas will say, I mean, just think about this, it's all of the benefit of all these practices called doing the Buddhas and the prostrations and the water bowls, all the quotes creating merit unquote practices, all the doing the 7 limbs and the this and the praying and the blur and the that, and the requests and the this and the that and the blah. Now I forgot how I began the sentence. That's what happens. I think I have to have Alzheimer's, you know. I woke up yesterday and I really had to think for like 15 seconds where I was. Do you think I've got Alzheimer's? Lost in the what? In the blah. Oh, there today, yeah. But what if I wake up and I forget where I am? I was quite worried yesterday. Do you think that's the reason? I really do worry about it. What's a sign of Alzheimer's? Don't you forget, isn't that a sign of Alzheimer's? Forgetting things. You do. But still, even if you do get, even if you are, you still lose. Don't you lose your memory? You do. I forget names, you know. Like I completely forgot Al's name. Even worse, I remember one time in Boston, I woke up early to get my friend Vikrant up out of bed because he's supposed to go to the airport and pick up someone. He slept in. So I stood at the bottom of the stairs, maybe because it's dawn. I was about to shout, and I forgot his name. I had to go to my computer, go into my contacts, and find his name. He's my friend. That, I think, has to be Alzheimer's. That's not to do with travel. I forgot Al's name. Oh, are there? It's not a sign I'm losing it. Oh, all right. I'm not losing my mind then. Well, I might be. So anyway, possible. It's a great term, isn't it? Losing your mind, or out of your mind. It's a really good term, actually. Okay, excuse me, where was I? Let's see where all these practices that look like rituals are in fact necessary practices. They're called actually, they're called preliminary practices. They're preliminary to the actual practice. So, but even in a sadhana, all sadhanas, all these practices using the deities in Tantra, this may be a good time. Well, we're not quite at Tantra yet, we'll get there. But something here. They're all, like we sat down with the monks that day, we did this Lama Chirpa. If you analyse it, what it is like all sadhanas, whether they're 1 page or 100, they're the same structure. There's the preliminary practices, then there's the actual practice, and then there's all the completion, like the dedications and the business, and they're all a variation of this. So in terms of our daily life, it's the same as the preliminaries that prepare our mind, prime our mind, like the studying and and the push-ups and the things and the jogging to get us ready to get onto the basketball court. The preliminaries are all related to the Buddha. This is a big deal in Tibet because Tibet's totally Mahayana and is totally related to Tantra, so the Bodhisattva aspect of all the Buddhas is like the underpinning all the practices there. So the most merit is created in the practices, like I was saying about single point of concentration, right? Is when you relate your practice, you bring in the Buddhas. Why? And this is the teaching about so-called power of the object. The power of the object. So we've got to think about this, but let's look at it really clearly again. In general, like we talked on the first and second day, when we, quotes, create karma, that is, have a thought, and then which is carried out by the body and speech, based upon a motivation. They're the components of an action. You know, when we do that, in general, like we've been talking, if we look into one action has got many pieces in it, hasn't it? One phenomenon has many parts. So one action of killing has many parts. One action of, generosity has many parts. There's the intention to do the action of generosity. There's the object of the generosity. There's the doing of the action of giving the money. There's their receiving of it. All of those make it a complete action of generosity. And then under the heading of intention, which is the crucial one, because intention equals karma. Remember the word really, karma, we use it colloquially, really means intention. That's the real essential meaning. It's the word for what the mind does, intention, I will. But unpacked so tight into I will that we don't notice it is the reason behind I will. And of course 99% now, because we're in samsara, our motivation for doing anything, including generosity, is mainly attachment. There's some virtue there, luckily. So the motivation for killing is completely delusion, attachment, aversion. We use the example where it might be compassion, although you're misleaded, you're deluded, there's no wisdom there, but still, technically, killing the mouse with compassion, for you, is not a negative action, because your compassion changed the whole dynamic. So, in general, the motivation is the key thing. The motivation behind the intention. They're so packed solid we don't notice it. We have to unpack and see. So the motivation is the key. In general, that's what happens with karma. Now, there are certain circumstances in which there are other two circumstances that that are more powerful, that override that. One is vows, like we mentioned. When you live in the vow not to kill, and you reiterate it every day, 24 hours a day, you are keeping that vow of not killing, even when you're not even thinking of not killing, not to mention no motivation. You're not even thinking of not killing, because of the power of vow, Lord Buddha says, so potent. And like I said, you have a subtle kind of energy visible to clairvoyance. There's something so powerful about it. This vow not to kill that pervades your life. That 24 hours a day you are not killing, even when there's no intention, you are creating merit. That's one thing that overrides the motivation. Marvellous to have motivation as well, of course, but vows are so powerful. And that's why, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, times are so deluded, so degenerate, that just being good isn't enough. Merely simply not killing and being kind has not got enough power behind it. So with vows, it puts like this rocket booster under it and makes us easily create virtue. We've got to think about this. But to me, this is what sustains me and even wanting to be a nun. The benefit of keeping the vows, the benefit of living in the vows of morality. Because morality is the bottom line, that is the karma we have to create to even get another decent human rebirth. That's one condition in which it is said to be makes virtue more powerful. And the other one is the power of the object. And this we have to think about as well. And that is, and this is what, again, Buddha taught, and this is what is the key to success in our practice, if we begin to understand it and apply it. That any actions we do, every action we do, because we're living in an interdependent social scenario of other sentient beings, we can see that most of the virtue and non-virtue we create with our body, most of the virtue and non-virtue we create with our bodies and our speech is obviously related interdependently to sentient beings. So we're doing good things to sentient beings, and we're doing bad things to sentient beings. So like we discussed, I think on the first day we discussed this a bit. Then we've got, so in the outside world we have a whole spectrum of types of objects, meaning the object of our action. You've got creatures, you've got humans, you've got holy beings, you've got Buddhas. There is a hierarchy. Not being horrible or rude. So in general terms, use this example. In general terms, the teaching says any action of virtue is virtuous, it's amazing, but you can quantify that virtue for you, for your sake, according to the object. So, strictly speaking, like I said, all due respect to ants, you can save the life of an ant, a stupendous action. Any action of helping a sentient being and not harming is amazing, very powerful. But if you save the life of a human, It's more virtue for you, more powerful, potent object, because a human at that time has more chance of doing something useful and therefore being of benefit and therefore developing wisdom than the poor little ant has. It's not only mean to ants, but even more than this, they go, the Lama's over when he goes in great detail, then even, for example, your mother or your father, because of the powerful karmic connection to your parents, of the role they've played in your life, how they facilitated your life, they are a very potent object. So harming your mother is seen as one of the worst crimes, killing your mother, because of the karma between you and this woman or the father. It's a heavier negative action because of the object than killing an ant, say. And if you think about it, it's not illogical. Then you get to the arhats and the bodhisattvas and the Buddhas, the Guru, all this. So as you keep going, they are more and more powerful objects because of what they are, who they are, and what their power and what they represent to the world and to you. So the most potent object of merit, quote unquote, is the Guru, Buddha, for us. So it's a skillful means for one's own sake to be skillful. We're not going to do much practice in a day. We're not great yogis in the mountains 24 hours a day like Geshe Lama Kongtrul, day and night. If we were, no props. So we've got to be skillful. And this always sounds a bit sort of materialistic and cynical to us, because we think the spiritual is all kind of mystical and wow and blah, blah. But you've got to be very practical and choose the practices you have the time to do according to their power. And this is not illogical. You've only got a certain amount of money. Well, get the best return on your investment. I really mean it, since we understand that. But that almost feels embarrassing to talk like that in spiritual terms. Don't be embarrassed. There's only so much day we have for practices. So if you're not much of a meditator, really, when you practice and you've taken your initiations and things, when you really know what's most potent, you do those. Okay, you do what you're committed to do, but you choose practices. So one of the things that anyone with half a brain, if you're a Buddhist, the thing you feel you must do is at least take vows. Then it makes every minute of your virtue more powerful because you don't need to have an intention and a motivation to get the power from it. It's a skillful means. That's a minimum thing. Then, of course, if you develop a relationship with the Buddha and you start to understand the power of the Buddha, then the Guru, like this, then any practices we do in relation to them, for us, is more purifying, is more dynamic, is more meritorious for us. And we must pay attention to this. We must know skillfully how to make the most, to get the most benefit from me. Don't think that's not spiritual. It's practical, reasonable, common sense. So, certain things certain practices we can do. For example, if you've taken, initiation, let's say, Lama Zopa, from all the teachings, would praise offering tsog as an amazingly powerful, stupendous, amazing, blissful, wow, far out, incredible, meritorious practice. So whether you're committed or not, you'd be nuts not to do it, wouldn't you? Of course we don't, It's like a tragedy not to do this. It's like missing an opportunity to get 1,000% return on your investment. I can't be bothered today, I'll do it tomorrow. It proves we don't know the benefit. We have to think about these things. During the 8 Mahayana, living in the eight Mahayana precepts for 24 hours. Inconceivable, the way the Lamas teach. I have to think about it. Insane not to do it. Well, it brings us to tomorrow. We'll come up with tomorrow. There's something happening tomorrow. I'll talk about tomorrow. We'll take the 8 Mahayana precepts if you want. We'll discuss. Because it's a set of vows. And because it's Mahayana-based, super potent. It's like skillful means, So learning these things, thinking about them, doesn't come naturally. So we have to think about it. Then we have a reasonable logic for understanding it. Otherwise, just do it with superstition because it's said so. It's helpful if we understand the reasoning behind it. Then it gives us energy to do it, So because of the power of the object, and why is that true? Well, I think, a good example. Let's say, on ordinary terms, let's say, the Dalai Lama's running across the road with his dog. And they're going to get run over. And you can only save one of them. I'm not being mean about the doggy-woggy. But I think it makes sense to save the Dalai Lama. Not because attachment would make us save the dog, actually. Because we're attached to a Harry, You get my point. But if we thought about it intelligently, it's reasonable to save the life of the Dalai Lama because of the power he has on this earth. It's very evident he has power. It's very evident he's affecting the minds of millions of people in a good way. So it's just common sense. This is what the power of the object means. So that's for the world's sake. There's benefit. But that indicates the power. But therefore the virtue that you create. And I think often we feel embarrassed to talk about, oh, what do you mean virtue? It just sounds like selfish. What do you mean I shouldn't think about the virtue I create? You're wrong. You must. Because then you know how to help others. You know how to help yourself first. Then you know how to help others. You know? So any practices that bring in the Buddha. So you could say you'd watch your breath every day very nicely. But just to say, Lama Zopa says, just to say the word Buddha. Don't be superstitious. It's not meant to be. It leaves an imprint. Remember, every microsecond of what you see, hear, especially those two, taste, touch, smell, think about, every millisecond of the day is like you're taking millions of little photos of that thing and you store it away in your mind. Let's say we wake up in this life and we can even, like I said, you see red, oh, there's red. You recognise pillar because you've seen it before. You've got the little photo in there and you know, it pops up. So you need the imprints of the Buddha, please. Just the sound of the word. That's why they talk about all this endless talking about Lama Zopa and his big Maitreya project or this big thing here, you know. He goes and waxes lyrical for hours and days and months. The benefit. You've got to think about this. The benefit. Seeing it. Just the imprint. Even the ants. The dogs. They have no awareness of what it is, but it leaves a photo in their mind so then they'll go, oh, there it is. Next life they'll see it. Oh, there's Buddha. They don't know why they thought that. Because the imprint was there, the photo. They took the photo and stored it away in the little memory. That's what karma is. It's a practical process. And the way they talk about the mind in depth in the model of the mind in Buddhism is highly hilarious and wonderfully sophisticated. It's amazing. I mean, even a concept. I'll tell you how they talk about a concept. They say, you know, I'll go, oh, there's a cup. But in that millisecond, quicker than Google, so many things happen. So for example, what happens is this, for a conceptual state of mind, eye consciousness sees shape and colour. It triggers the mental consciousness. It goes into the little kind of all the filing in there of every single phenomenon I've ever known in my life. It eliminates every single one of those that is not cup, and then it comes up with non-cup. And then I say there's a cup. That's what happens in your conceptual mind. It's more sophisticated than the most amazing machinery. This is how they say the mind works. Super fascinating. Highly technical. And all knowable, but mysterious. And nothing to do with the brain. This is the mind. So the power of the object. So when we understand this, then we understand thoughts. Why it's beneficial to have thoughts. You just sit there daydreaming about goodness. I mean, who daydreams about goodness? We do not. We only daydream about me and what I want, or poor me and what I'm not getting. We never have daydreaming and have, fantasies about being good and kind to others. We never do that, unless we're going to get something back for it. Unless it's based on attachment, So we can daydream, like doing the mandala. You're just using your creative imagination, thinking all the wonderful things, all the handbags and the jewellery and the this and the perfume, piling all up, offering to the Buddha. It's so simple, it's a joke, When you understand karma, then you see the reason, the benefit of it, and the power of the object. So all these practices, prostrating to the Buddha, it's like very respectful, like a shaking hand, a very respectful handshake, greeting a person, Then you, in your mind, in your mind, then you're confessing, you're making offerings. That's an amazing practice. They say karmically, we need an accumulation of minimally the morality of refraining from harming. Indeed, done in the context of keeping vows, that's what makes it potent. But that's not enough. You need then to have anything in this life. You can have a very nice, handsome, intelligent human mind in a very handsome body living in a desert. Not much use to you. You need things. We need leisure. So to get leisure, we need money, because that's the way the world is, and we need things to facilitate our life. This is a result of generosity. Even access to 1 grain of rice is a fruit of your generosity. And indeed, you're not stealing. So we need morality and generosity, fundamental, to get a reasonable life. Then we, of course, need spiritual practice and aspirations, and may I meet the lamas, and may I have the teachings, and may I never forget the Buddhas, and may, blah, blah, blah. Aspirations, everything exists on the tip of the wish, as Rinpoche said. Again, karma, the mind, to set up the conditions. The next life we will get born to a decent family, bump into the teachings early, so we have to wait till we're 35 or 60 before we die to meet the Dharma, Next life we're going to meet it at birth, unfortunately. to the power of the object. Are we communicating? Do you have any questions about it? What haven't I made clear? There's no questions, that's great. Well, yes, Don. Uh-huh. Well, that's a very nice way to put it. You know, I would suggest that the more we go past all this religious component and the holy and the mindful and this and that, and we look into this model of the mind and study it in depth, I think it's not a wrong conclusion. Buddhism is high, when you get past all the packaging, is actually the understanding of the mind is, yes, really is highly sophisticated. It's really true, and it's the essence of cognitive therapy. Change your mind, change your life. It's the essence of this, to the subtlest degree. The levels to which mind goes are not the subtlety, and the levels to which we can unpack and change it, and the degree to which we can change it. There's nothing remotely like it in the West. It's access of truth. I would suggest, I agree. It's true. No, it's all about that. It's that the mind is central in all of Buddhism. It's the point. It's not just a secondary thing. It's the point. And it's what determines everything. Karma is the job the mind does, and that's the factor. All these things, everything comes down to that. Yeah, it's true. It's hard to see it. It's hard to hear it. And most of the view of even most Buddhists is very superficial. We can see. Most of us, I mean, I don't study that much, but many bits of study I've done, how come I can even be saying this? You know? Most of us just think, oh, yeah, being mindful, be nice. Better than nothing. Religious, believe, you know, say a few mantras. Nothing wrong, but the levels to which we can go, and it's hidden unless you go into it more deeply. Absolutely, I would agree. Any questions? Let's go back to the 8 verses. I think we finished really, but let's just remember where we were with the 8 verses, 160 something. Thank you. So again, this text is written by Langri Tangpa, this disciple, I think, of Drom Trompa. There's no colophon here. He was the main disciple. What's it saying? Okay. The bigger text in which this is coming, the ever-flowing something, nectar, something. Colophon. Oh, no, nothing. This thought transformation text has been translated from the Tibetan and provided with a nectar ray purification and commentary by Thupten Zopa, a non-dharmic beggar who was intoxicated by the demon of the self-cherishing mind and possessed of the great pride of being a Mahayanist. I have done it mainly to subdue my own mind, but also with the idea that it might help the intelligent spiritual seeker of today. That's this bigger, the bigger practice in which this 8 verses, the ever-flowing nectar of bodhicitta, annihilating the demon of the self-cherishing mind. These wonderful dramatic phrases. But here it is. What follows is an 8-verse teaching. This is the essence of it. I think he's put the other stuff around it. Yes, the essence of it is that that text. The Rinpoche has added all these bits and pieces, it seems. So what follows is an 8-verse teaching that contains the entire technique for transforming the mind into relative and absolute bodhicitta. What that means is, this is a term they use in the text, absolute bodhicitta is referring to the realization of emptiness in the context of bodhicitta, in the context of the Mahayana. That's what it means, absolute bodhicitta. Relative bodhicitta is referring to bodhicitta itself. It was composed by Langri Tangpa Dorje Sengye, a disciple of the virtuous friend, perfect in all knowledge, Kadampa Potara Rinchen Sal. Okay, it wasn't John Trompa. Who in turn was a disciple of the holy lamp of the teachings, Atisha. Of his guru Potaw's 8 part sons, Langri Tangpa was the only one to receive the special instructions on exchanging oneself for others. So again, just getting back, Atisha was an Indian master and scholar and saint, holy being, who was invited to Tibet in the, Lord knows, 11th century somewhere. And he spent the remainder of his life in Tibet. And it was he who wrote this text, Lamp for the Path, which is the basis of this Lam Rim teachings, which is the basis in most of the Tibetan traditions, but which Lama Tsongkhapa in the 14th century, our lineage Lama, picked up and ran with. And he calls his structure that the teachings he's put together based on that text, he calls it the Lam Rim, gradual path, this course, that puts all the teachings in an orderly, experiential way, orderly in relation to your capacity to internalize it. So this whole genre of practices, like I'm saying, in the Mahayana path, coming from Atisha and his heart sons, and then this one, whoever he is again, Langritapa Doji Senge, disciple of one of Atisha's disciples. This lineage of these, they call themselves the Kadampa Lamas. I forget the name. What's the meaning in Kadampa in English? What's the meaning in English? Anybody know? Can't remember. Kadampa. What's the meaning in English? Remember? No, I can't remember either. So anyway, then all these, so this generally the Mahayana is about the development of compassion and love, which leads to bodhicitta, which leads to Buddhahood. This extra potent level of practice on top of wisdom, on top of realizing emptiness. So these traditions of practices and lineages have come down to us, and they pay a lot of emphasis. It makes sense in a proper system that's coherent, but you track back those lineages, you track back the traditions, you track back the series of teachings coming from this, coming from that, which shows its validity. It's not just popping up out of somebody's mind out of the blue and they made it up one day. And so this whole practice coming from Atisha, he apparently was, I don't know much about his biography, but he went to Indonesia, met one of his lamas, the Lingpa, from whom he took all these teachings about, called transformation of mind, called Lodong, which is the teaching of exchanging self for others, this radical approach to cultivating bodhicitta, exchanging self for others. And then they came to Atisha, he kept it secret, he taught it to his disciples, and after Dromtomta, it must have been this other one of his disciples, it started to become public. So when you read all these things, they sound kind of cute. Like I said, it's not like emptiness, which seems like intelligent and it's just clever and bright, sharp mind. But these ones seem kind of simplistic on the surface. Love your enemies, it sounds so cute, easy to say, don't squeeze your brain. But hey, I think they're far more difficult. I think emptiness is easy intellectually in comparison with this, in my opinion. Shift the mind, shift the heart, unbelievable. And so this whole structure we've been doing, these 11 points, is a combination of two methods of accomplishing bodhicitta. One is a 7-point cause and effect, which is the first 4 steps, and the next 4 or 5 is part of the whole one of exchanging self for others. And there's 11 as a combination, starting with equanimity, the basis. And so this is Langritangpa's text, and the 7th verse is the one of giving and taking, and then this practice of so-called Tonglen in Tibetan came out of this and became this really amazing practice, giving and taking. So from in all this too is this massive practice of transforming problems, of getting rid of the 8 worldly dharmas, as they call it. Again, it's just this way it's been presented over the centuries, getting rid of the 8 worldly dharmas. In other words, it's a subtler level of smashing attachment. Having subdued our body and speech and mind in the first stages of practice, really subdued our body, speech and mind, and getting some really deep, intelligent understanding of the way the mind works, really profound, knowing the delusions intimately and well and how they function, subduing them, then moving into the bodhisattva path, we're very qualified to go to the next whole level to see more subtly how attachment runs the show, primordial. So this is expressed in this simple little package called the 8 worldly dharmas. The 8 worldly concerns. The 8 ways attachment runs us at the deepest levels. And so the most marvelous, direct approach to these 8 ways that attachment works is understanding attachment, how it's desperate to have nice things. It's a junkie for good feelings. It's a junkie for nice words with my name in it. It's a junkie for a good reputation, and it's a junkie to get things. That's it. That's the way it expresses it. It covers all the ways attachment works, actually. So, obviously, the logic is, if attachment is the cause of the suffering, day to day, if it is, then it follows logically every time it doesn't get what it wants. That's practice. Right there. It's obvious. Right, that millisecond that attachment doesn't get what it wants. That millisecond, that second, you just purify the attachment. Of course, we just get upset instead, and then we get angry, and then we create more negative karma. So the real teaching is that the millisecond attachment doesn't get what it wants, you cheer. And that's the problem. It's so opposite. Like, Florrie comes home late. Oh, thank you for coming home late, darling. You really helped me see my mind and my jealousy and my neurosis. I'm so grateful to you. That's practice. We can see it. It's practice. It's obvious because the second your attachment doesn't get what it wants, it's a marvelous opportunity because you've just weakened it. But the trouble is the next millisecond we get angry and we reinforce it. And this is the trick. So to be able to see problems as good, and all a problem is, by definition, is when attachment doesn't get what it wants. It's clear. Of course, we make it much more sophisticated and complicated what a problem is. We think it is real and permanent and definite and true, but it's a problem inherently. And this is why emptiness, an understanding of emptiness is vital in this practice. Absolutely vital. Like we talked about prison. If we talk about emptiness, okay, about inherent this and inherent that, and how it's merely labelled, finally, everything, that's the subtlest. Remember the subtlest? The subtlest meaning of dependent arising, which is the most powerful logic to prove emptiness, which is the real meaning of Buddha's teachings on emptiness, is that nothing exists that doesn't depend upon thought and concepts. The first level of dependent arising, which is the gross selflessness for most Buddhist, earlier Buddhist schools, is that counteracting the view that there's a self that is permanent and independent of causes and conditions. That's the grossest one. And so thinking about karma is a wonderful antidote to that. Then the second one, which is so tasty, which is a subtle selflessness in most of the schools, but is gross selflessness for the prasangikas, and which is anyway a marvelous one, is that there's no self that isn't independent of the aggregate. The view that's been counteracted is that there is a self that's permanent, there is a self that's independent of the aggregates. There's a pointable, findable, separate part. Like there's anger in my mind, there's jealousy, there's love, and I have a nose and a tooth, all the bits and pieces of Robina, and we were completely convinced there's another bit walking hand in hand with those bits called self. That belief is how we counteract what we counteract with the second understanding of self. But the tasty, the real one, the hardest one, the subtlest one to get to. And this is the level at which Lama Zopa Rinpoche only ever teaches it. And any chance you get, you go to like in Hong Kong. I went to see Rinpoche in Hong Kong. I'm working on a book of his about how to help people at death, and the title of the teaching was meant to be how to help people at death. I thought, okay, I'll get some new information. Well, of course you don't get that. What you got for 8 hours on 3 nights in a row was emptiness, subtly dependent arising. I was very grateful. Didn't get death, but it's okay, So where I'm going here. The more we understand emptiness, the more transforming problems is easy. Because right now, because we are addicted, meaning having attachment, we're junkies, to getting what it wants, with the absolute assumption that that's happiness, getting the praise, getting the things, having the happy feelings even, and getting a good reputation. The absolute unspoken assumption which this entire world of ours and all our models of the mind and all science and all psychology and all philosophy support, that that's happiness and therefore self-existently happy, the more mad it is to think that having a person insult you is good. So you've got to see, when the more you understand emptiness, the more easy it is to see how that's logically true, not just kind of like practice, like being a martyr. I should see it as good, poor me. No, the more you see emptiness, the more it makes sense and the more easy it is. So everything, as Lord Buddha says, exists, finally, subtly, in dependence upon thoughts and concepts. There is nothing that exists that doesn't depend upon thoughts and conflict. So anyway, in relation to transforming problems, this is stupendous, fantastic. And a great example for me is my friends in prison. So, so we analyse, again, prison. First, let's see how it's empty in this real meaning. And how it's empty, independence upon thoughts. Look at it. What's prison? As soon as we say, oh, he went to prison, we instantaneously know how to respond, don't we? Because conventionally, and never forget conventional, there is a prison with a big wall and lots of barbed wire and lots of electronics and lots of keys and no freedom and lousy looking clothes and horrible food, and you're seen as the scum of the earth, you're the lowest in society, even lower than homeless people. No pity, because you're a criminal. So all of those are the thoughts, aren't they? All that's an awful lot of story there. If you've never heard any of these concepts before, you have to write about a whole book to explain to somebody all these thoughts so that you know how to respond when you say, oh, we went to prison. Now, what is all of that but thoughts? What is all of that but thoughts? So, my friends in prison, who are trying to practice Dharma, are able to see it as good. Now, the point is this. They're able to transform the problems. The point is this. If there were a prison that does exist, that isn't dependent upon these thoughts, then that's an inherent prison. And if it were that, you could never, ever, 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 ever be happy in prison. Ever. Ever. Period. Finished. You're done. Because if prison is self-existently bad, that will be a different thing. But the fact that my friend in prison, like one of them, Ralph, he's got 25 years, he's got 25 to life, and he goes first his parole in like 17 or something, 2017, he's waiting to come up to it. Working hard, trying to be a good lad, becoming an electrician, teaching the prisoners, all these things. So when I finished my meeting, he said, oh, I'm going to go home now, bye. He's made a decision. This is his home. He doesn't go, oh, I have to go back to my cell for me, so I can't wait till 2017 when I get parole. He's happy and perky. Done his education, learning, how to be a good guy, learning how to help the other prisoners, watching his mind, practicing. This is his home. His ugly place is in Kentucky. It's not pleasant, I tell you. It's ugly little Victorian dump. Chains and barbed wire everywhere. Hideously hot in the summer. Freezing cold in the winter. No freedom. Food's horrible. I had lunch in the dining room a few times. But it's his home. So it's my home. Hi. Very happy, perky, funny fellow, He's made a decision. It is a crummy place. If you saw ads in the real estate things for a home, a nice cell in prison, oh, I'll get that one, that's free. I don't think you want to go. Conventionally, because it is a horrible place. Conventionally. It is ugly. It has got this. It is punishment. It is those things. But not from its own side. And because of this, it's easy to transform problems. But if you've got a rigid mind, again, I'm not criticizing. It's heartbreaking. Again, one of my friends I can think of, been in prison, was on death row in Michigan. Then the governor cancelled death row, all the terrible mistakes being made. I think everybody got so mad and they chucked him out. So rude. He cancelled death row, They're looking into it. So all the guys on death row in Michigan, which is where Chicago is, isn't it? Chicago? No, it's Illinois. Or maybe he's in Illinois. Sorry, he's in Illinois. Yeah, near Chicago. So, young guy, black guy, when he was 19, he ran with a bunch of dudes, homeboys, guns are there, people die. So, of course, he gets death sentence. That's what happens. Nice boy, the wrong place at the wrong time. Good heart, huge good heart, just so kind, so happy to help people. And then the death row got cancelled, and so now he's got life. So it seems to me, it's my own observation, for years and years and years, all these letters, so perky, so happy, so kind, so sweet. There's like an optimism in him, And now he's got this, after he's been there already, it's like he's 17 years, he'll be there till the day he dies, unless something changes. It's like now the deepest of depression. It's the real, yet still able to really see this is his life. So all he thinks about is how to get out of prison. If I had a lawyer, and I had this amount of money, and I only had this, and I only had that, and I only had this, if I could get this. I'm not criticizing. So always depressed, always sad, always unhappy, always stressed by it, because he's unable to change his mind. Like Ralph has, or Nick, who's going to be in a couple of years. Just using examples, I don't wonder. Look at us, not in prison. How pathetic we are and can't change our minds. So to be able to have the view of emptiness, to begin to understand intellectually at least that there's nothing there from its own side, that there's no problem from its own side when Porritt comes home late. It's a hard one. And the only way you can get to see this is if you unpack a lot of the other delusions, the grosser delusions, which are the voices of ego grasping. You've got to calm the attachment down, calm the anger, calm the jealousy, calm the depression down, which are the rapid, violent ones every day, that all have the same function as ego grasping, insofar as they're disturbing and they're liars. But they're the kind of branch liars. Once you calm the branch liars down, it's easier to hear the root liar, which is ego grasping, seeing as inherent. And this is what's necessary to really apply to transforming problems. That is not so difficult. But of course, all of this takes time. But the logic of seeing problems as good is because attachment is the cause of the suffering. It's just logical. Just as everything in us goes against it. They're terrified. The horror of not getting what attachment is. It's too much. It needs enormous courage, enormous hard work, enormous purification to prepare your mind to do this seemingly simple job of getting on board. And it goes to years of purification practices, all the water bowls and all the frustrations and all the serving the Lama and all the serving of the Guru and all the serving of sentient beings. That's how you prepare your mind. Then it's more easy when the problems come, when you get criticised, when you get sacked, when he leaves you. And guaranteed in life. Like reading these numbers yesterday, I said, was it 800,000 people or something kill themselves? It's only 600,000 die in terrorists and wars and violence and car accidents and cancer and AIDS and everything else. Killing yourself is the most, I've never heard that before, beyond belief. Nearly 1 million people a year in the world kill themselves. So if you can change your mind, is the one. And we don't know it. We don't know it in our world. Utterly heartbreaking. Beyond heartbreaking. Change the mind. Understand attachment. Transform problems. So then, the Bodhisattvas who are really seriously, fanatically, dementedly doing this level of practice. As Geshe-Sapa said, I remember when he said it, Vajrasattva, he leaned forward and he said, Bodhisattvas need their enemies. Bodhisattvas would rather live with somebody who didn't like them, whom they didn't like so much. So if Bodhisattvas are really kind to you, be suspicious. I'm joking a bit. You understand? Guaranteed the one they love most is the mean person, the ugly person, the horrible one, the mean one, the nasty one. That's the one they love most. Because that's the one that triggers their practice most. Bodhisattvas are they feel the same. When we get something, they feel like that when they give something. Whatever we think, they're the opposite. They would rather have bad things happen than good. They would rather be punched in the nose and kissed, because every time something good happens, they get nervous because they're using up their merit, This is the attitude, and of course they're so developed in it. And it's not as if it's out of our range of thinking. I mean, I used to think of Lance Armstrong, but now he's naughty, isn't he? Isn't he coming back to being good again? No, still not. Everyone's determined to hate him, aren't they? They're never going to forgive him, I think. No one's ever going to forgive him. Lance. Always Lance. Good stuff. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Of course he did. So the point about Lance, though, for me, is this fanatic way he would be, this amazing. Okay, he used drugs. So what? I mean, they all use drugs. But somehow it seems so naughty, It's like it's the bad thing at the moment. And everybody, it's okay. Never mind that. This is my opinion. Who cares? But the point is, look at that fanatic effort. His mind still was super intense, So it's really obvious. For Lance, let's say, going up the mountain is what he wants. He'd rather not just sail down. He wants that effort. I remember reading a long story about him in the New Yorker years ago. And I always remember hearing he had like 0.0 something fat on the body, just this phenomenal machine of a body. And you can imagine his fierce mind. So for him, truly prefers the problems. It's just the same. Truly prefers the challenge. Anybody who's a fanatic anything, a fanatic sportsman especially, they exhaust themselves to the limit of beyond exhaustion, because that's when they're happiest. Well, that's the idea of transforming problems. They don't want to sit in their couch and relax, This thing about moving all the time. Yeah, there's a latest story in the New Yorker about people who on the walking machines while they're working, standing up, constantly. They burn up like 500 or 600 calories a day by doing this. Instead of running, they just work while they're on the treadmill. That's amazing, isn't it? Very sensible, actually. Killing two birds with one stone. It's great. Very sensible. So anyway, there you go. Transforming problems. And of course, the immensity of it, because we can see one of the things about attachment is the inertia of it. Isn't it? The death, the kind of the yearning for the comfort. The yearning for this comfort zone. Through the senses. This body runs the show. So to go beyond that, oh, so hard. But we have to understand the logic of it. Then we're happy to try it. Happy to try it into light. But you've got, of course, the key to all this is catching your mind, which is coming in junior school, where you start to do some meditation and see your mind, Because you can't transform a problem at the second it happens if I'm not watching my mind. Because transforming problems is done by the mind. Is seeing it as different, interpreting it different. So within that 1 or 2 minutes or 10 minutes before he gets home late, from jealousy and paranoia to, hello darling, how are you? How'd you go? Have a nice day today? Because you changed your mind. You have to see it. Yeah. So transforming problems is pretty amazing. And all of it comes out of this tradition of practice. So this whole of these 8 verses, the progression of them. The first one is to get, because you want, we've been through it once, we'll go through it again, because you want to get the most from these sentient beings. They are the grist for your mill. These maniac mothers, these deluded mothers out there, they're the ones you're excited about. They're the ones who are going to be the test for you. They're the high mountains for you. You can't wait for those high mountains. That's sentient beings. Because they're the ones who trigger the delusions, aren't they? So you've got to hold them most dear. They're most precious. These crazy mothers are the most precious ones. The point is this, again, remember, if you're still struggling on the wisdom wing, still struggling to even know what you think and you feel, still struggling with your fear of what people think of you, still struggling with your victim mentality, don't do this. It's too advanced. I'm serious. It's too much. Try if you have to. But be aware where you're at. And so keep out of the way of the sentient beings who make you crazy, because you can't handle it. You're not ready. You're not qualified yet. And this is already an intelligence that most of us don't have. If we had this intelligence, 99% of us would leave those crazy relationships and get out of the way. We know we're in a danger zone, but we don't. Our little neediness is like a little perky little thing. Please love me, bash, kick. Oh, then he'd love to be a victim, go off and complain and sue him, If you had any common sense, you get out of his way. But who has common sense? We don't, because we're overrun by attachment to being loved. Like we're pathetic and needy little things, Isn't it? We're pathetic. I mean, we're like pathetic, needy little needy machines. And then we blame the person. It's very naughty, I tell you. So here's me dumping all my needs onto this poor boy, thinking he's God, thinking he's handsome for his toe to his toenails. But the neediness, the expectations, is like a vampire in there. Like almost if I'd written down all my contract, which I'd be too scared to do, the demands I'd have of him would be stupendous. He'd back off immediately if he saw all my demands of my attachment. And then because of my neediness and my expectations and my fantasy, I dump all that on him. I mean, that's an impossible thing to fulfill. And some relationships, you can see people are exhausted by the needs of the other person. Because no matter what you do for them, they're never satisfied. It's like your mother, who's actually really needy, really attached. No matter what you do, you could give your blood to her for breakfast, she still wouldn't be satisfied. You could sleep in the bed with her, she still wouldn't be satisfied, because attachment is never satisfied. And of course, because we have all this guilt in the relationship, this terrible guilt, and we're trying to make the person happy, and the more we try, the more they want more from us. So we feel like our heart's being ripped out of us. You communicate what I'm saying? So we have to see this process and have the courage to know that it's their terrible attachment. I can't satisfy them. We can see how we make each other crazy because of it. We've got to want to make them happy. I've got to want to make my mother happy. Never stop. But I have to know I can't make her happy. She has to play in this tennis match. So don't expect her to be happy. Just do what you can, and then and then walk away. This is very powerful, actually. We have to do this. We're so caught up because we think we're supposed to love a person, supposed to make them happy. No, you've got to want to make them happy. You've got to want to make them not suffer. That's your side. Always be open to that. But don't have any expectations that, that they will play the game and get happy. They won't, unless they're working on their own mind. So you go to your mum, and she'll just moan, complain, criticise you, pull you down, like her old sort of attachment causes her. That's okay. Put up for an hour, you're hers for 1 hour, 2 hours, love her, be kind, and then walk away and let her be. It's got to be ruthless in a way. Kind but ruthless, not sentimental kind. There's nothing worse than sentimental kind, which is kind based on attachment. They will drag you to hell. Do you understand? Really, do you understand what I'm saying? You've got to have such a courageous mind. Know what your mind is and know what theirs is and see the difference. And then don't play the game. Be loving, be kind, and laugh at their jokes. Yes, Mummy, I know I'm terrible. Yes, darling, I do understand. It's so hard for us because our mothers hook us, or the partner hooks us every time, and we sink into misery and nightmares, and then fight and rage, and then feel guilty, and then forgive, and then off we go again. It's like hell. How you could live in it, I don't know. So help you to get the hell out. Goodbye, I'm leaving. Don't blame them because you can't handle it. So don't hang around. This is for people who are eager for the problems because they're so advanced. It's high to say, precious mother human, sentient beings. Don't just think it's a huge idea. It's an outrageous concept. You've got to be ready for it. Really. Shocking. And then when you're with others, it's insane. Each one gets more insane. See yourself as the lowest of all and see them as superior. Insane concept. We mostly, just desperate to be needed by them all, want to be seen as nice. That's mainly what motivates us in a group of people. Or shyness. I'm not being horrible to you, but shyness. What do you think shyness is? It's self-consciousness. Which is I. It's sort of, nervous about what people think of me. So actually, people around the Dalai Lama, I remember so well, he says things like, whoever I'm with, they're my best friend. And everybody. I remember in 96, FBMT invited His Holiness to Australia. He was here for like 2 months, nearly a month in Sydney. And when I was editor of Mandalore at the time, and we did an issue, a special issue, during the time, which was given away, and we did another special issue about the village. And I remember interviewing many of the people, the players, like 50 people, the police, the guards, the media, every kind of person working around His Holiness. And maybe just 1,500 words for each person in the magazine. Every single one. It was amazing to see it. Every one was blown out. The police, these regular Sydney coppers, who were his guard, his guard detail, police detail. Every one just moved deeply by this human being. Every one in the media couldn't believe it. People in tears. Very fascinating. Everybody said, they felt like he was special. They were special, just in his presence. So what's so interesting, I always think about, he's clearly so charismatic and powerful. And as soon as you think charismatic, powerful, and then you think, even too among Buddhists, he's kind of renowned as one of the best scholars. So as soon as, and then even the top guys. So as soon as you think you're a top guy, you know that you're a better scholar, you know the effect you have on people. So you'd think, well, you'd have to be proud, you're a bit arrogant about that. You couldn't not know it. And we assume as soon as you know it, you have to be arrogant. But those thoughts don't arise in his mind, assuming he is what he is, which is a Buddha. He happens to have a personality that's charismatic. Not all Buddhas are charismatic, believe me. Some of those skinny little fellows in their cave, snucking away, looking boring. You understand? All Buddhas take all shapes and sizes, He happens to be charismatic. Lucky us. He can grab us. So he looks powerful. He looks like a boss. Like I said, when he does, I remember watching one press conference. He just dominated the whole thing. You go there, you go here, what's this, what's that. He was the complete boss. And after 10 minutes, it was gone. They were kind of all wheeling, He completely ran the show. He's amazing. But he's humble, phenomenally humble, and only sees everybody as superior to him. It's hard for us to conceive of this. Actually, not just liking them, but superior. Very hard to hear that. Hard to imagine it. Because we tend to think of humble person as kind of low and small, Like when you see Lama Zopa with the Dalai Lama, it's almost embarrassing to us Westerners. And if you see photos of Lama Zopa with His Holiness, he's always bent double. He'd rather be sitting on the floor, underneath as a seat for His Holiness. Sincerely, and any of the great lamas are like this. And so half the time in the photos, His Holiness is trying to pick up Vajrasattva, kind of. And he's looking sort of guilty with his eyes like a little boy, you know. It's almost embarrassing for us in the West. We think it's a bit kind of creepy. Come on, Vajrasattva, stand up. And in the photos, we're all standing like this next to His Holiness, all beaming, you know. He's like this. Whew. That's what we think of as humble. It's very funny. It's almost embarrassing to see it. You can't. That humility is almost like, oh, come on, Vajrasattva, please stand up. You understand? This is my arrogant mind, you know. That's what we think of as humble. I remember one time when I first met the Lamas, I'd become a nun. I was working at our centre in England. And because the work I've done in my life is publishing and graphics and editing and that kind of thing, whatever, I was doing, we were starting to work with wisdom in England in 78. And I remember I was in this room doing some work on the first book we did, Silent Mind, Holy Mind. And Vajrasattva walked in, just saying, he sat down and read a magazine. For about an hour, he just sat there, you know, it was very interesting. I was doing my work, trying to be not self-conscious. And then at some point, on the way out, there was a photo there, and in fact it was of Vajrasattva in Laudo, the mountains in the distance. So as Rinpoche walked out, he caught the sight of the mountain, must have recognised, went, oh, like that. And then he picked it up, and he saw it was him. It was a very strange thing. He went, oh, kind of looked hot, disgusted, you know. He was disgusted. It was a photo of him. Now that's extreme for us. We think that's weird. That's like self-hate. We just done an interview with some of my prisoners on the phone. We're doing this, never mind, whatever, doesn't matter. A reason for doing it. And we got on the phone, and one of my friends interviewed them. And then the person who did the editing of the little piece, who's doing a video of it, kept her voice in. And so we usually have self-hate. She freaked out when she heard her voice. Please take my voice out. I can't stand the sound of my ridiculous voice. So the normal way we think, if you go, oh, it's like self-hate, isn't it? It seems peculiar, or like I'm sort of bending over, like it seems really weird. But it's just utter humility. Utter humility. Hard to hear it. And yet there are times there's Dalai Lama standing up straight, always stands up straight. He doesn't walk like this. He does a bit. He's all perky and bossing everyone around. It's hard to see his humility. Seeing others as superior. Seeing yourself as a relative law. Again, if you're not ready for this, please don't do it. Because the suitable vessel, I remember that vividly in Pabonka, you've got to be a suitable vessel to practice this level. So if we can do it once a month, amazing. Sincerely from the right place, understanding the logical reason why you would have this attitude. You know? Time for a break in a second. And it keeps getting worse. This seems quite easy, this one, but it's outrageous. Watching like a hawk your mind every millisecond. The minute a delusion arises, you avert it and chuck it out. So like, again, insane. The assumption being there's virtue in your mind. So we can say, even though non-virtue is rampant, whenever we notice it, catch it and do something with it. We can do that, definitely. Why? Very simple, because it's causing you suffering. Causing you to suffer. And because here also is the enemy in relation to sentient beings. Because every time you're self-cherishing, you're deluded, you can't help sentient beings. So bodhicitta is compassion and bodhicitta are very much in the mix here, or compassion. The aim is here, compassion. In the wisdom wing only, it's just play safe. For your own sake, quit the rubbish. Here it's for the sake of others. And now, progressively worse. We see horrible, ugly, mean, mad, insane, maniac, pedophile, terrorist monsters. Not just people wicked in nature. Maybe they didn't have very many evil people in Tibet, so they had these gentle terms for it, you know. Isn't it? We found the most precious treasure. And again, the logic is so simple. They're grist for your mill. They're grist for your mill. That's it. That's the reason they're a treasure. That's all. For you. They're yours. It's like Lance Armstrong's mountains. He loved his mountains. They look like monstrous to us. They'd exhaust us. They'd kill us. That's all. That's it. There are all these objects out there to help us rip the delusions out. The next one, getting closer to home, when people abuse you and mistreat you out of envy, harm you and hurt you. Give the victory to them. The next one, even more close to home, I've devoted my life to this man, loved him, taken care of him, cleaned up his toilet, cleaned up his dishes, ironed his clothes, done his dinner, you Porrick, washed his clothes, his smelly old underpants, loved him, giving him all my secrets, because we do that. We vomit every single deepest, the recesses of our being into this beloved who understands me. I give him the treasure of my heart. And then he leaves me. I think it's beyond bearing. It is beyond bearing. I don't know how it could be borne. I'd rather run away. I think it's healthy. Beyond bearing. The level of devotion and adoring and attachment and giving ourselves to this other person in our life. And then they leave us. Overnight. People even come home with a note. I run off with the secretary. Honestly. I can't even conceive of the pain. Or whatever the variations are, whatever the scenarios, it has to be unbearable. Absolutely. And then what is the one there? What are you supposed to do with this lot? They're your guru. Your holy guru. They're your holy guru. I mean, excuse me. You've got to really be a suitable vessel to even go anywhere near that thought. This stuff is over the top insane. Whew. And then conclusion is Tonglen. Conclusion is Tonglen. Giving and taking. So I will offer every happiness, directly and indirectly. I offer every happiness and benefit to all my mothers, and I will secretly take upon myself. Secretly, because you're not going to show off, in your heart. Take upon yourself all this suffering. This is the technique that's become known as Tonglen, that is the central technique, where you finally make this paradigm shift that kicks into bodhicitta. That now only others are in your mind. They say one of the first of all the criteria, the first criterion of having accomplished the first moment of bodhicitta is that there's no longer the thought of the neurotic I. This is inconceivable to us. Of course, you say the word I. You know your I, not the you. You're not stupid. But there's no longer the self-cherishing I, the needy I, the attached I, the angry I, the hurt I, the jealous I. There's only, like the analogy is of the mother thinking of her child. In the mind all the time. Of course, it's attachment, but that's the analogy. It's a good one. Only the child, thinking day and night, like a hope. Day and night. Especially if it's a sick child. Day and night. That's all. It's always in the back of their mind. If they're washing the dishes, they're smiling on the phone, they're talking, going shopping. In the back of their mind, their child. That's what the bodhisattva has. Every moment is others. Inconceivable. Can't conceive of this in our culture. There's no reference point to anything as remote as this. And if there is someone like this, like a saint, we just think they popped out of the sky as saint. You don't have courses on how to be a saint. But that's what this is. Buddha says we can all become saints. That's what a saint is. We call it that term, saint. Self-existent saint. Mother Teresa is just a saint. But depending on who you are, if you were, who's that English writer who died recently of cancer? Total, very clever with words. No, who died of cancer and who was a friend of Dawkins, total atheist, and wrote this scathing book about Mother Teresa and other things. What's his name? Always writes, one of the columnists of the Vanity Fair. Hitchin, thank you very much, Christopher Hitchin. Loathes Mother Teresa's monster, this evil little monster. So it just shows its view. What people call her a saint. Saint. Well, this is being a saint. We're trying to become a saint. And the way to be a saint, wisdom wing, all the delusions, above the laws of karma, see your mind, go into it deeply, be your own therapist, rip out the delusions. Now this radical, amazing, outrageous, courageous work of coming down from the mountain and joining the maniacs again, the sentient beings who are treasures for us. See them as the best of all, see yourself as the lowest, take the abuse, give the defeat, see the person who harms you out of envy, as give the defeat. The person whom you've helped and devoted your life to who turns against you, see them as your guru, transform, turn the whole thing around, Tonglen. Pretty amazing. And then finally, undefiled by the stains of the superstitions, of the 8 worldly concerns, where this one comes in, these 8 ways that attachment functions. The desperate, frantic default assumption that happiness is having good feelings, so fundamental you almost can't even understand how it can't be. That the good feelings, that's what happiness is. And remember, we talked. Remember, this is so important when we understand the mind. When we learn the Buddha's model of the mind, we break down all these components in our mind. Mind's just a label we give for all the contents. Simple way of saying it. So you have to learn the context. And in the mental consciousness, there's so many states of mind. But there's one text, as I said, the 51 states of mind, the 51 mental factors, as they call them. But to learn these. But there's one, as I said, the vital one to understand when it comes to karma, a crucial one. It's called feeling, remember? There's a package called, that 5051, there's one package called the 5 always present mental factors. And that's any moment we're functioning as a reasonable human being, these 5 are all working constantly, every millisecond. Any one missing, you lose the plot. You know? And one's called discrimination, which is this simple, bare bones, intelligent ability to distinguish between pink and white, red and this, round and square, clock, table, clock, all the things we can do naturally every day. And crucially, of course, when we're practicing, this is an absolutely vital state of mind to have honed and good to distinguish between virtue and non-virtue. Without this, we're lost. Discrimination. Second one is, and this one I'm talking about is called feeling. Feeling. We use that synonymously with emotion. There's nothing used here. It's a more bare bones term referring to 3 kinds of feelings that we have. There's no 4th kind. One is called a pleasant feeling. One is called an unpleasant feeling. And one is called neutral. So the ones that mostly concern us, of course, are the unpleasant and the pleasant, therefore happiness and suffering. And of course there are degrees of these. It's clear, isn't it? So we are junkies for the good feelings, first and foremost, isn't it? So even all the others, you can say, trigger those good feelings. Getting nice words gives you a good feeling. Getting nice things gives you a good feeling. Being praised gives you a good feeling. Having a good reputation gives you a good feeling. So, but they're attached to good feelings, assuming that's happiness. Of course, that's the default assumption in our universe that propels us in samsara. And like I said, if we look at our day, track our entire day, you track internally, you got a little graph, you know, graph. You could track, you know, for 14 minutes I had good feelings, and then went down to bad feelings. Then it was neutral feelings, it was very bad feelings, it was reasonably good feelings, it was like this. If you tracked your day internally, you could do this, you would do this, because your day was looking like a seamless movie. If you break down movies, like I said, it's a series of stills that gives the illusion of being a movie. But there's millions of stills throughout the day, a million moments. They say there's 72 moments or 64 moments in a finger snap. So talk about when you do the Olympics and you win by a millionth of a second. It's like that. There's countless moments in a day. But it's the illusion of a seamless day, especially if things look reasonable to us. There's no dramatic changes. This is how it is in the mind. All these feelings stored. So, what is a good feeling? Even if it's a series of a million moments, it adds up to 10 minutes, or however long good feelings last, which is not that often. We're up and down like yo-yos. Then each of those moments is a fruit of a virtuous seed you planted in your mind in the past that's now popping up. It just fruited. That seed's over. That's a good feeling. That's what it is. The fruit of a virtue. Triggered, like I said, by the good praise, the nice food. Not caused by it, not the main cause. We think it's the main cause. That's why we keep eating the cake. Not. Just trigger. Then the bad feelings, the unpleasant feelings, depending on the level, and we don't notice them as a trouble until they're very bad, then we go crazy. So the therapist kill somebody, kill ourselves. We're not tracking the feeling. And we don't know their cause. So the unpleasant feelings are the fruit of non-virtues, depending on the degree. So when we know this, we understand the logic of what a good feeling is. It's the fruit of my virtue. And because we're junkies, because we're in the samsaric body with these senses, we're junkies for those. We want those all the time. This is what runs us in samsara. And the state of mind that the good feeling itself is not attachment. A good feeling is a good feeling. Hey, how lucky you are to have a good feeling. It's the result of your virtue. You deserve it. You caused it. You grew it. You got it. But we have a wrong understanding about why it comes and where it comes from. And so because we're junkies for those good feelings, because we find the unpleasant feelings unbearable, frantic, or like desperate, like a junkie to desperately get the fix, to make it go away. So this is one of the 8 worldly dharmas, the first one. Assumption that good feelings is happiness. It's a weird phrase because we assume so assume that happiness and good feelings, you can't even separate them. And the assumption that unpleasant feelings is suffering is what motivates attachment. So we keep desperately get the good feeling. So clearly that little fisherman, seeing the fishing, triggers good feelings because of past karma. He assumes fishing causes good feelings, so of course you keep fishing. The torturer gets good feelings when he tortures. So he assumes that torturing causes the good feelings, so of course he has to keep torturing. Very tragic. This is samsara. So you have to understand the mechanics of where these feelings come from, what it is, how this, blah, this, karma, that, all the nuts and bolts, and that's in the wisdom wheel. All of this is coming to bear in the compassion wheel. So the 8 worldly dharma is this first one, attachment to good, assumption that good feelings is happiness. The assumption that bad feelings is suffering. So attached to getting good feelings and attached to being free of bad feelings. The second one, the assumption that having praise, good sounds, praise, sounds with my name in it saying good things. That's praise, isn't it? Hearing nice sounds with my name in it. Desperate, like a junkie, it's like heaven when you hear it. This nectar comes, and you eat it up. Give me more, please. Desperate. When Porritt comes home and says that you're so kind, Robina, like desperate to get more, please. I beg you, Porritt, please, more. And then when he comes home, he gets irritated. I want to kill myself. Or I hear him. Like, you know, did you see the, it was a very nice movie about Marilyn Monroe. I've got to have a break. I keep saying it. Yeah, have a break. Come on. I'll tell you about Marilyn Monroe later. Yeah. Okay, question. Yeah, good. Happiness is very simple. We say, being samsaric, happiness is what you get when you get what you want. Very simple for the Buddha. Happiness is, which is, okay, more precise, we think happiness is what you get when you give up, when you get what attachment wants. Buddha says happiness is what you get when you give up attachment. That's it. That's it. That's what smashing the 8 worldly dharmas is all about. And so it's sort of like, it's a very simple analogy that when you're a junkie, you think the fix gives you the happiness, and then you know it's causing you suffering, because every time you have it, as my mummy used to say, the more you get, the more you want, and you start to realise it's terrible suffering. So you know you have to give up the junk. And of course, initially, it's like a nightmare, isn't it? It's like hell, going through the what do you call it? Withdrawals. But because you know it'll feel better at the end, you're prepared to work hard. That's what giving up attachment is like. It's like hell first. You think you're going mad when attachment doesn't get what it wants. But because you know logically that the happiness, and there's this whole said one time, it was very interesting, it looks like the happiness that you get when you give up attachment, looks like peace. It's kind of boring happiness. It sort of looks like, it sounds like boring happiness. When you're into sort of dance and lounge and up all night and drugs and this and that and boyfriends and sex, the happiness of old age looks really boring. Isn't it? Because it's peaceful. It sounds so boring. It's not very exciting. So for the junkie who's in the midst of the drama of getting their fix, the thought that having no craving just sounds boring. But this is where we have to think about it carefully and realise that happiness is much nicer. Because it's the freedom of not having the neuroses and it's bliss eventually. Okay, simple. Okay, perfect. No, okay, the point is this. Good feelings are perfect. Good feelings is all you'll have when you give up attachment. But because you have no longer the misconception from where they come from, because you no longer believe that the cake brings them, now, you see, we've got this store of seeds in our mind of virtue from hard work in the past. We have this store. But because we're in this body with 5 senses, the mechanics of triggering that good feeling, the only way we know is to get an object. So getting a sense object triggers that good feeling, pops it up. We don't know how else to access it. And so we assume the cake causes it. That's why we have to keep eating the cake. So when we understand that and then the good feeling we get is a good feeling, but because it's triggered by attachment, the stronger the attachment, the more it pollutes it and makes it contaminated happiness. Buddha calls it contaminated happiness. The feeling the torturer gets, it sounds revolting, when he tortures that person, is called pleasure, but it's so disgusting and mixed with all the attachment and the creepy, crawly, yucky, junky, horrible stuff. It's still technically, there's a pleasure in there, but it's completely contaminated by all that stuff. Whereas that pleasure is perfect. It's happiness. We're not trying to get rid of pleasure. We're trying to get more pleasure. But it's pure, unadulterated, uncontaminated, natural happiness which is the result of virtue, and it's the natural state of the mind when it's unencumbered by all the junk and you've given up the junky mind. Then the pleasure you have is deep and profound and does not ever change. This is what Buddha's saying. Do you see? So we have to understand the mechanics, the nuts and bolts of it all, otherwise it's just confusing to us. And we get all guilty and shamed about pleasure. As Lama Yeshe says, the more pleasure the better, dear. That's what Buddha's saying, really. We've got to understand what he means. Are we clear? Is it clear? But to think it through carefully. I think we'll have a break. 30-minute break. Ponder all these things. And see you at 11:15 and we'll do the meditation.